Yeah, hello and welcome to our lecture series on climate protection. So today Thorsten Schwerte is our guest. I will introduce him shortly, and yeah, after our lecture there is a protest march just in front of the building. You can join if you want. Yeah, and today Thorsten Schwerte will present his lecture about bioinspiration and climate protection. Thorsten Schwerte is head of the Institute of Zoologie at the University of Innsbruck since 2017. Moreover, he is part of the working group Signal, Data and Image Analysis. His field of research are really as interdisciplinary as our lecture series. So it ranges from physiology, bionic and product development, and digitalization in biology and geoinformatics. His field of research are flexibility and development of the cardiovascular system, bionics and bioinspired research and development, geoinformation systems in biological research. His lecture of today is about bionics and its application for climate action. What can we learn from nature in terms of handling energy and resources, and how can we transfer these into technological, social, and economic methods? Looking forward to his presentation on bioinspiration and climate protection. Welcome, Dr. Schwerte. Okay, I'll
So thanks for the invitation. Welcome to my presentation today. I will present you something, of course, on this topic, but I will also explain how the bio-inspired workflow is working, because bioinspiration and bionics is not always copying. Is the stream now working? Ah, okay, it's working, yeah. So I was already introduced, but to give a short summary, I studied biology in Germany, got my master's in Germany and my PhD here in Innsbruck, and I started physics as well before biology, but then I decided, and I was wrong, that in physics there is nothing more to discover, but yeah, Innsbruck tells us a new story today. And my PhD was about the cardiovascular system, and I developed image analysis software that was bio-inspired, because my camera systems or my recording systems did not show what I was able to see. So I trained my system to look at images as my own retina is doing. Okay, so my habilitation was in zoology, but my master thesis was in plant physiology, so I'm some kind of broad in the biology, and that is even working towards bioinspiration, because then I have an overview about the plants and the animals as well. Okay, so nature has surprisingly good solutions to many technical questions. And the reason for this is, yeah, the mechanism or the emergence out of the vital system on our planet Earth that comes out of evolution. And biologists and engineers very often cannot understand these structures and functions because, yeah, they are not obvious how it is working, but it is fulfilling a function that is astonishing. So, for example, waterproofness or heat protection or specific locomotion and so on. And to analyze this, we use technical biology. So we use the methods out of many, many other disciplines like physics, chemistry, electronics, and so on. So what does evolution have that research and development units and companies don't? So one, they have an infinite amount of time. So the evolution has an infinite amount of time, 3.8 billions of years that were used to develop life on Earth. So they have masses of highly motivated organisms and engineers working in collaboration together, and every mistake you have to pay with your life, or you have to at least to arrange with this error. And yeah, collaborative and parallel interdisciplinary global collaboration. And this ends up in crowdsourcing and swarm intelligence. Although not all organisms build swarms, you can see a population of one species as a data pool, which is optimized. So a population is only then stable when every single organism in it performs in the best way. Okay, sometimes we have structures, sometimes we have interrelationships, or even strategies. And also animals and plants have amazing senses. So nature has many superlatives, and yeah, so very often these superlatives or the underlying mechanisms are not obvious. And sometimes humans judge that these are superlatives because they don't have these senses. So we are not able to see, for example, infrared light, or we are not able to sense an earthquake up to minutes before it happens, and so on. But animals can. And so the strategy today is to build an Internet of Animals, parallel to Internet of Things, and to use, for example, satellites to analyze crowds of animals and the behavior of them to predict something that happens in nature. So the sixth sense of animals is used by so-called biohybrid systems. Or we are using biohybrid systems to detect victims, so war victims that are under tons of concrete, for example, using cockroaches, which are where you have an add-on computer on them, so you come into ethical issues as well, to find these victims. And so this is some kind of biohybrid robotics, and you can find these biohybrid robotics in so many places. So in technology, inventive steps are defined as, so an inventive step is something, it's a requirement for a patent. So you have to invent something and not to discover something. So just to go into nature and say, oh, this works on this or that way, it's not enough. So you have to do research on it, you have to analyze it, and then you can have an invention. So the invention does not have to be obvious for a skilled person when to compare it to prior art, for example. So for example, when you look at this butterfly here, unfortunately it's quite dark over there, the body of the butterfly behaves some kind of special. When you look here in the time lapse, you see that the body is bending and that you have actio and reactio, and the mechanism how a butterfly is flying, although you all have seen butterflies, is not obvious because it is too fast. You need techniques to produce time lapse videos and so on. So biomimetics is also called, or I call it, reverse engineering. And so we observe, we build hypotheses, experiments, analysis, or doing analysis, and then we come to an insight. And this is called biomimetic reasoning. And a biologist has a different biomimetic reasoning than an engineer has. And so for a future project, we want to analyze and we want to build an ontology of biomimetic reasoning to train an artificial intelligence in the future to translate from an engineer request to a biological literature research, for example. So the steps of abstraction have to be defined by an ontology of biomimetic reasoning. So biomimetic researchers analyze structures that are usually of a complex nature, given structures of these systems and functioning structures of these systems. So in evolution, an organism is optimized as a whole compared to something in engineering where you're optimizing single components, so like a screw, for example. So the method is analysis. That is the scientific method of biologists. In contrast to designers and engineers, the method is the synthesis. And that means you have systems of usually a comparatively simple nature that need to be constructed. So no offense. Of course, buildings and machines are complex, but compared to biological system, much, much fewer complex. So you have disconnected but constructible individual structures that are combined in an acceptable or suitable manner, and you get this by combination to function. And so structures that exist only as mental possibility have to be turned into functioning structures. That is the synthesis process of an engineer. So designers and engineers can become biomimetic. So designers by definition conduct an applied and practice-oriented science, and biologists, on the other hand, initially focuses on gaining knowledge out of basic research. And biomimetics is the applied science with an industrial or in society an application of knowledge in nature. So at the University of Innsbruck, biomimetic research exists for several years, for decades now at our institute, but in the last nearly 10 years, we built a platform at the University of Innsbruck of researchers that work with bio-inspired research, not bionics, so biology and electronics, but bioinspiration. It's more or less the most abstractive word that you look into nature and you get inspired. But getting inspired, analysis, and then conduct research on that is sometimes even more complicated. So how do humans come to ideas? They have sometimes analogical reasonings. They have convergent and divergent thinking. So for example, Gutenberg looked at a wine press, and from that he was inspired to a printing press. So a wine press is not biology, but maybe it was Leonardo da Vinci here on the top right, who was one of the first bio-inspired researchers, although he didn't name himself like that. And he observed many, many things, and he always had a notebook at his belt and was noting and observing, and every idea was written down in his notebook, because it's more easy to throw away something that you cannot build than having an idea. So when you look at this here, so here we you have some flying seats, some mono winglets, and when you look at this, or you look at the colibri, for example, or at colibris, and they all use a similar trick to fly. So many insects also do it like that. So they are producing turbulences over the wing. It's not the typical wing where you have a higher velocity of laminar flow on the top side and a lower velocity on the back side. You have a pressure and a suction. It's not that way. So it's a turbulence that gives you the rise up. And this strategy was invented many times independently in nature. And that is amazing. So yeah, so the answer is some kind of easy. All these mechanisms were developed under the pressures of physics, with the rules of chemistry and, yeah, of course, evolution. So plants and animals are biological constructions itself, and sometimes they do construct as well. So, for example, when you look here at this crab, it has stolen the house of a snail. Interesting. Or this here, it's a larva of an insect, and this insect constructs some kind of a housing out of biogenic and non-biogenic substances. So different strategies. And on the next slide, you see when you give artificial materials, so like small pearls and gold plates and wires and so on, this insect is producing something that looks artistic. And when you look at this animation here, this insect is working like an ornamental robot. And there seems to be a strategy, because when you look at many of these products, you always have some pearls at this position and different stones using in a specific manner. It's not chaotic, it's some kind of planned. So this is an artistic project here, but this is it's one of the first biohybrid robots, because robot from the word means to work, from the past. So, but when you look at the role model nature, biomimetics is not merely copying, but constructing and implementing in a modified way after analyzing these systems. And Ingo Rechenberg, a researcher, a retired researcher from Berlin, he did his PhD in the method of evolution and applying it to the engineering. And he defined three answers that have to be agreed as yes, that nature has gives a good opportunity to be transferred to the techniques. So here on the down left, you see that nature has to work on the same function. So when you compare the antenna of this butterfly here and an electric antenna, the function is not the same, because these antennae, they sense single molecules, and this works with electromagnetic waves. So the second thing is that nature has to work under the same boundary conditions. So for example, these small single cell animals here, they're so tiny that their weight is very, very low, and they have to do some locomotion in a highly the viscosity of the water to these tiny animals is very, very high, and the Reynolds numbers are completely different when you compare these single cell animals to this submarine here, for example. So again, this is not the same, but with you can use numbers and models to calculate a translation from different boundary conditions to others. So for example, the stingray in water can be a good model for a flying object in air, but then you have to adopt the velocity, for example, because the viscosity of air compared to water is numbers different. So, and the last thing here is the quality criteria. So when you look here at a species Papava, or in German the Mohn, Schlafmohn, and here this salter here. So the quality criteria of something that has to spread the seeds is to spread the seeds very, very wide, but it's not your plan to salt the plate of your neighbor. So this invention, yeah, never went to market because the quality criteria was some kind of different. So what I already told you, it's summarized here on these slides here. So function has to be similar. Here you can see Raoul Francais was able to get a patent on this invention, but in today's patents, you do not find even hints for bioinspiration, because then when your patent is going to the test and they see that you use bioinspiration, they're looking even deeper into your inventive steps. And then it's better to not to say that you have been inspired by nature. Okay, so, and even architects can use structures like this. Yeah, so there's the Wurmkogel bar in the Ötztal. It looks similar to this structure over here. So this paramecium, as I already told you, Reynolds numbers are different. But when you look what these continuum physics numbers tell you, then you can calculate from one condition to another. This is a trick what you can use. So there are, that you don't stand in the rain, there are 3 rules and 7 thinking steps. Function, similar, yes or no. No, then stop. Yes, go ahead. Boundary conditions, similar or not. Stop or calculate and go ahead. And then the biological quality criteria. And when even those are similar, then you can use the evolutionary solution. Otherwise, you have to trick some kind of around. Okay, architects are good observers as well. Here, this is a Wurmkogel bar, and it looks very, very similar to this capsule of the Papava species. Okay, so there was another horticulturist and landscaper, Joseph Monnier, and I am quite sure that the architects know his name, because what did he observe? So he had huge plant vessels, and when he left the soil in there over winter, they all very often broke down, and they were very expensive. So he was thinking about a solution, and in this cactus here, in the Opuntia, he observed that when they got rotten, that they have a sclerenchyme network in the leaves that give stability to the leaves. And so he produced the idea to manufacture flower pots using a multi-component construction method. And here is his patent. So, and this is, the patent is on, so what is it in English? So the reinforced concrete, or in German, Stahlbeton. He was the inventor of Stahlbeton, and this was a revolution to architecture. So many buildings are made of this reinforced concrete, but also these plant vessels, or something for the railways and so on. So here just use some artificial intelligence generated lab books, and these look, yeah, some kind of may resemble the lab book of Leonardo da Vinci, maybe. So drawing something or constructing something in your mind and putting ideas somewhere and handle with that is the first step to train your mind to find something in nature. So this is the so-called prepared mind you all have to work on. So from observations to prototypes, for example, so you use the methods of physics and chemistry, for example, and I will give now some examples of some selected examples of bioinspiration. So Louis Pasteur said that in the field of observation, chance favors only the prepared mind. So you have to define your problem properly. So imagine you want to buy a new car, or maybe a mobile home, and you never had one before, but now you decide, oh, okay, I want to buy a new one. And then you're on the motorway and you see hundreds of these vehicles, and before you never did, because your mind wasn't sensitized to that. So your mind was not prepared enough. And Max Planck said that for abstraction and implementing, you first have to do basic research. You have to recognize how things are working. You have to describe the underlying conditions. And so he said, before implementing, recognition must take place. So it was Werner Nachtigall, also a retired professor, one of the first bionics or biomimetics professor. And he said that the invention or the innovation process has 3 steps. First, recognize something, then analyze the underlying mechanisms, and then start implementing. It is correct in itself, but unfortunately, this path is not that simple. So let's expand on that. So first you have nature, and then you have the biologists. They are analyzing biology. And they use informatics to collect all this data and to analyze all this data. They use electrical engineering to build sensors or data collection systems and so on. They are using chemistry to analyze, for example, metabolism and so on. They use physics to understand the physical properties of these systems. And all this ends up in technical biology. Okay, using this, you can transfer it to an idea that when you understand it and you find some kind of abstraction that ends up in biomimetics, and you come to a solution. By the way, Edison said, okay, I found a way to produce light, but I found at least 150 ways to not produce light. Yeah, just to keep that in mind. It's also correct in itself, but still too simple. It looks a little bit more like this. So you have the technicians or the engineers on the one hand. They can do some technology pull and asking, so you're a biologist, how does nature store or collect water, for example? Or how does nature protect from the brutal heat of the sun? How does this work? So when you think, and the biologists say, okay, when you have a very tiny animal, and this tiny animal has a very, very low volume compared to its huge surface, compared to a bigger animal that has a comparably low surface to a huge volume. So when you have, for example, a mosquito, and it flies into the sun, without any clouds, it has only minutes to survive. It has to find you to hide, to get shadow, and to suck on you to refill with water. And that is a problem. That is an immense problem. So these animals are very, they are nasty and we don't like them, but they are poor. Yeah, they're really poor. There are other small animals, so mammals, for example. Here in the Alpine Zoo, you have this Etruscan screw. It's a very tiny mouse. It's very, very light, maybe the tiniest mammal on Earth. And it has to eat all the time because it loses so many energy over the surface that it has to eat every half an hour, even during the night. It cannot sleep 8 hours, no. It has to wake up every 8 hours, and it eats up to 6 times its own body weight per day. And there you see that in many optimizations in evolution, energy is in the center. Because for everything out there, energy is limited. For us, it's no problem. If we want to eat something, we can just take some of our stored money and buy something. We can buy 1 liter of oil, which compares to 9,000 kilocalories. For an animal, it has to pay and put into the balance every locomotion. Some people, so students told me, yeah, but an animal, it just can walk and walk and walk, and per instance, it finds something. I said, no, it has to pay everything. And so, for example, honeybees, they calculate how much fuel they take with them. First, they are full, and then they search for flowers. And the next time when they come back, they only fill 20% maybe, just to reach these flowers that they can fill up 100%, go back, and deliver as much as energy that is possible to the stock, to the population in the stock. Yeah, and that is interesting. Yeah? And yeah, with this strategy, even errors can happen. So, for example, when a honeybee goes to a silver linde, I don't know the English word, and it contains caffeine. And caffeine fakes the bees. The bee judge the carbohydrate content of this plant much higher, and then they are not able to go back to the stock. They end up in the middle and die. That is interesting. So you see, keep your fingers away from drugs. Okay, so what is the next step here? So you have also biology pull, but only few biologists dare to tell an engineer, so I have an idea, because the engineer poses so many questions, and the biologist says, I cannot answer these questions, because they both have a different language. So biology push is, yeah, it's not very often. The technology pull is quite more often. And that is the reason why so many physicists, are in the field of this biomimetics, because they can pose the right questions and so on. And of course, I am training our students to learn the single alphabet, or the very, just to be able to pose a qualified question to an engineer. That is enough. Then it may work. Okay, so the next steps is that informatics is now expanded to another bio-inspired technique. It's artificial intelligence. Yeah, it's very modern today, and models for generative design. A current project we started today is we are using bio-inspired and generative design with artificial intelligence for architects and engineers in a consortium of 22 teachers from all of these fields. And all the participants, 30 participants, they are all crazy to learn all this, because transferring or training artificial intelligence with all the knowledge out there in nature, that is the next step. Okay, so from here, from an invention to get this to an innovation, it's a rocky road, because an invention is just an invention, but to make a product out of that, that is a step to an innovation. That is some kind of a rocky road. So generally, the disciplines speak different languages. So, for example, locomotion in biology is completely different from technical locomotion. So an electromagnetic motor has a stator and a rotor, and of course energy and a commuter and so on, and you have a freely moving rotor in there, but you never find this in biology. In biology, you can have undulating movements, for example, in a spermer, so where you have movements like that, but you have a fixed position in there, but never something that is freely moving. Or you have undulating movements like this here in fish, for example, and you need technical biology to get this bridge over here. And this bridge can be produced by artificial intelligence in the future, but it has to be trained by an ontology of biomimetic reasoning. For this, it needs an interdisciplinary consortium of researchers to train these artificial intelligences. So technical biology is practiced by many researchers, but the results of this discipline do not necessarily have to be implemented. So, for example, out of my research, we found that zebrafish, when it is born, it's only 5 millimeters in size. It has a pump, the heart, that pumps in the nanoliter range. And this works as a suction pump. So we analyzed this using the technique of particle imaging velocimetry. And yeah, it works as a suction pump, and said, oh, this would be nice for having micro incubators and so on. But those who published that, they didn't even indicate this purpose, that it could be transferred to other fields. So an ontology has to do this job. Or a motivated researcher who said, and now I want, there's a question, a technology pull out of from the engineers, and I will try to bridge this, or will train students to do so. So this is not very sustainable at in the current position where we are right now. So implementation can also be done by other authors, and that is what I tell my biology students. Sorry. I tell them that the literature, so the biomedical literature or the biological literature, it's a gold mine. When you look, or when you learn how to mine the gold into in literature, then you can observe, create a new job in the future, because the jobs in biology, they are not that fixed. So a physician, everyone knows what a physician is doing or will do in the future, but a biologist, you don't know. You have to create your own job in very many cases. Of course, in most of the cases, they end up in a lab somewhere, or they're developing something. But in more cases, they go into this bioinspiration design field, and they build startups. So out of my research groups, there are already 3 startups. Me myself, I have 3 patents looking for products for pest control or for better installation in honeybee hives, because the honeybees are very important pollinators that are correcting the problems that climate, the increase in temperature produces, because the biodiversity of insects is decreasing and decreasing. So there are not enough pollinators out there. So we have, and that is one of our most important steps, is we are not ethically not allowed to take information out of nature without giving information back. Although animals are not, they are not vocalizing in a way we understand. Although this is not true any longer. So a research group in Graz, they built a biohybrid beehive, integrating a robot in there that was communicating with the bees. The bees were driving decisions, swarm intelligence decisions. These were transferred via the internet to Zurich in Switzerland, and they used a biohybrid robot in the form of a fish to communicate with a swarm of fish, to share their decisions and to drive species, interspecies decisions of species that will never get to know in nature. They had a translator communicating over species, and that is something like the future maybe as well. So when I talked about the Internet of Animals, to get information to predict, for example, an earthquake, it's just driving information. And from physics, we know that information, or to get information somewhere, or to store information, is decreasing entropy. And entropy equals to energy. That means when you buy a hard drive that is empty, you have a huge entropy on there and a very low energy stage. And when you put information on there, so you're sorting the zeros and ones to a text or to an image, or maybe to a huge square that is simply black, you're sorting and you're investing energy. So that means, from the philosophical point of view, when we look into nature and take information out, we are influencing the system. And so we have to give information back. And that is the way how we have to communicate in the future. So, but biological systems, they have their peculiarities, which are essentially due to their very often overwhelming degree of complexity. So these require special types of approximation, research, and the way to describe. The way to describe, I already mentioned the biomimetic ontology. And yeah, this was also Max Planck who said that even a disappointment, if it is only thorough and final, means a step forward, and the sacrifice associated with the resignation would be more than pay off what you already invested from the knowledge you take out of that. It was unfortunately was cut over there. I had a different typeset when I designed that. So, so what are the main challenges in nature? So the main challenges in nature, so the first, when you look or when you are mining the biological literature, is that many times you find that animals have to stand predations. Predation, so when you think of sharks and tiny fish, yeah, you have a system that is some kind of interaction. Yeah? A shark comes and is eating a tiny fish, and the fish has to do something against that. So, for example, camouflage, or mimicking that it is also a big fish by a swarm, for example, or going into the deep sea, developing special eyes and having a lantern that is illuminating the environment by red, and having a retina that it is, because all the other fish, they do not see the red that good. They are very sensitive to green. But this fish, it can collect 3 photons, 3 red photons, summing it up to a higher energy photon. So it can use red light to see all the environment, for example. Yeah? So these are strategies, so we can learn so many things. So for example, so camouflage. Here are some QR codes, and these QR codes link to our YouTube channel. And in this YouTube channel, so we have many bio-inspired videos, so 2 to 3 minutes to learn something. And something I put into the center is, what can I do with this research knowledge? And that means that I'm doing the transfer, or I'm giving the inspiration. So you can use this to solve that. And that is very often something that is interesting to people to find this. So for example, very often I'm posing a question. So how can you avoid to be detected by a face recognizing camera? Then you have to understand, of course, how does this recognition work and how can you interact with that? Or, for example, when you look at Aborigines, for example, they are using body painting, sometimes black and white stripes, and yeah, this may be some kind of tradition, but it's also in parallel has the advantage that the mosquitoes don't find this human as fast as a non-colored or a non-striped person. It's interesting. So, but imagine when you're a mosquito and you're going towards a zebra, then these stripes become bigger and bigger very fast. And this irritates these animals. And so they're not able to land on these stripes. So this is the hypothesis, and yeah, more or less the theory behind this system. So, and my invention, for example, uses the optical flow that animals are using. So we have so many invasive species here. So for example, the tiger mosquito is already abundant here in Austria. And if we have bad luck, so for example, in Graz, this could happen, they will establish even over the winter. And the tiger mosquito is transmitting some very bad diseases. So for example, the Zika virus. And our patent, for example, uses one trick. We understand how does an insect, when it is flying, judge if there is a signal disturbing interruption, for example, like a wind from the side. The animal, so when you're moving, for example, you see that the world is going under you, but it's not irritating to you. But when you're staying at the sea, for example, and the water with some bubbles on it runs towards you, you may fall into the water because your calculating system and stabilizing system is confused. And you can do this with insects as well. So you can project, so in a sleeping room, light patterns that can be seen by mosquitoes, but not disturbing the humans. And you're driving these patterns to the side, and then the animals are correcting their flight. And they are not able to find you, although they smell you. But the more expensive, so this is a lesson from nature, the more expensive a sense was, so the development of our eye, it was very costly. So it is a very dominant sense. So imagine you're hungry and you're smelling a pizza. Yeah? So you're going to the search for pizza, and you go into the next room, and then you see a table full of pizza. And then the smell comes from the side. But what is your decision? You go where the pizzas are, don't you? Yeah, and that is the thing that you have to understand, what sense is dominating. Okay, so you see, of course, yeah, this invasive species is just to eliminate a problem that comes up with climate change, for example. But you can also use camouflage or coloring to do some climate control. So there are beetles out there that change their color depending on what kind of weather is. So they are more bright in the dark, because a bright corpus has a fewer energy loss than a black one during the night. And during the day, they are black. Yeah, you see that they are changing its color depending on how much energy they use. Or there are insects that are able to sort ions that way, that they produce electrical energy. And electrical energy is, from the physical point of view, a more qualityful energy compared to the waste of energy that is heat, for example. To transfer heat or light into electrical energy is a smart process. Yeah? And this takes place in every plant. It is sorting ions and producing a voltage, for example. Okay, so what is the next challenge? Resource availability. So food, water, and shelter drives natural selection. And organisms have to learn how to handle this lack of water, lack of energy. So there's, for example, this water basking beetle that is habited in the Nibe desert, and it goes into the fog that comes up the hill and has some waxy water repellent and some water hydrophilic bumps on its protection covers, on its elytra, and these are some kind of calculated that way, that having a specific wind speed and specific humidity, and is optimized to collect pure water out of the wind stream. And you can transfer this to other boundary conditions to somewhere else. You can use nets or whatever, but structure and function is very often coupled. And here again, you have some QR codes that give you, I just selected some of them that are connected to these main challenges in nature. And by the way, when you're already there on our YouTube channel, just put an abo over there and activate the bell, then you do not miss anything in the future. So the next challenge in nature is environmental conditions, climate, weather patterns, geographic factors, light conditions, whatever. So animals during evolution were able to adapt very fast. So there's something that is called rapid evolution. So we did an experiment. We took zebrafish they are a model for so many things. So I worked on the cardiovascular system on them, but also on training physiology. So I had them swimming in a current that was close to not stand the current. Ethically, some kind of critical, but we adjusted that many, many times. We had camera systems detecting if they are in the net at the end of the tunnel, too many fish being over there, that this did not happen. And yeah, but we took them out, so you're fine. You can go into a different tank, but they're very good swimmers. We selected them for only 5 generations, and then we got the super swimmers with a different genetic profile compared to the average population. Very fast. So, and now you can pose the question, are humans also able to do something like that? So for example, you have these pearl fishes. Humans somewhere, they, from the tradition, they look many, many times, or they are diving without equipment, so apnea diving, and they are trained, and always the best are the most successful, and they are different in genes. They are able to stand a longer time without atmospheric oxygen compared to the average people, or something else. We have some pollutions in nature. So for example, microplastics. Microplastics are in the mouth of everyone in the double sense. So you're eating about 5 grams per, so 1 credit card per week. And yeah, there were researchers that said, so is there an organism out there that is able to decay or to destroy plastics? And what did they do? They went into one of these PET collecting and recycling companies, and they were looking for microorganisms, and they found a microorganism that is able, that has an enzyme that is able to get energy out of PET. So, and now the thing is, so you find in the sea where you have these huge water tornadoes of plastics over there, you find these microorganisms as well over there. And now you also find these microorganisms in most of your mouths as well. So we already started to collect microorganisms that are able to use microplastics. And there are so many other things where, and yeah, there were many comments on that YouTube video, and people are saying, it's so relieving to learn that humanity can handle that. I said, yeah, it's not a problem. We don't have to save the planet. We only have to save ourselves, because then in the second way we get to save the planet as well. Yeah? So although life, there were biodiversity extinctions many times before, at least 3 times during evolution. And for the Earth, it doesn't make a difference if there is a human being or not. So humans maybe leave the planet on the one or other way, but the planet Earth may recover, or for sure will recover. Okay, so so what are we giving back? So I said, not just taking energy or information out. So the thing is, when we look at honeybees, they looked for housings like a hollow in a wooden stem of a tree. And so the, I don't know the English word, the Wärmedurchgangskoeffizient, so the heat loss coefficient or whatever, is about 0.5 in a tree. And this is far away from a highly energy efficient house, far, far away. So we used material that is derived from building houses, using as natural as possible in the inside, so wood and sheep wool and so on. And we, of course, detected that the main problems for humidity and for condensation is in the edges. So we dissolved the edges and we constructed a new beehive that is, of course, expensive. Yes, it is about, this prototype is about 500 euro or something. And the normal beekeeper is only willing to pay 40. But they will change their mind. I'm quite sure they will. Because they're asking, so, but bees are heating anyway. So why are you doing some insulation on the beehive? That yes, they have to heat, but they have to pay for it as well. And as many energy as they use for heating, the fewer honey you have. And then you got that beekeeper and said, oh, I get more honey out of that. Yeah. But what is in the summer when there's a brutal heat of the sun and you have this highly insulated beehive, isn't it a problem? I said, no, it's no problem, because insulation protects you from heat as well. And the animals, the bees, are ventilating in there and producing convection in the hive, because an animal population or the bee population is a super organism. They have many, many tasks to do, and these tasks change over the age of these animals. And we can learn so many things out of them. So that is our way. So animal welfare, we have 3 projects of animal welfare. So in fish, in bees, and in other insects that are cultured to give something back to them. And we think that maybe this can not only produce some positive karma, but also maybe from the philosophical or ethical point of view will change the mind of many other people. So next challenge, mate selection. Okay, so the producing of sexual dimorphism is something you can observe in nature. So you have colorful males in the birds and good camouflage in the females, and you have a dimorphism more than in humans, or just, yeah, no, it's not easy to judge, but you have this sexual dimorphism. But when you look at humans, so how many sexes do we have right now? Is it 90? I don't know. So male, female, non-binary, and so many other things. So is this maybe a strategy to produce more diversity, to get them more stable, whatever? Yes, we don't know. So next challenge, mate disease and parasites. Okay, diseases. Now, I don't have to tell you anything about corona and so on, but parasites. So again, the honeybees, they have to fight against parasites. It's a varroa mite that is a parasite on the bees. But when we increase animal welfare and they use less energy for heating and for regulation, they have more energy for grooming, more energy for hygiene and so on, and they're healthier. No question, they are. So, or for example, we have new material. So from the research group in Graz, I think I have a picture of it. Okay, here. This is 3D printed with a filament with PLA and wood in there. And then it is inoculated with a fungus. And this fungus, on the first hand, produces from the mycelium an insulation on the next step, it is antimicrobial. So it decreases the rotting of wood in the inside of the beehive, because the fungi is an active organism. Huh? On the outside, you have sometimes these typically umbrellas of the fungi, and the inside you have the mycelium. And in the project we currently have, we have a course where designers learn how to use generative design to design a beehive in an interesting way, using a design sprint or design thinking, and then inoculating them with fungi. And then you have these bee populations in there, just as an inspiration. And here you see these prototypes. It's a collaborational partner. It's Assia Ilgin and Thomas Schmickel, both very interested in these bee cultures. Something else what we were doing, we are faking these varroa mites, for example. We know, or maybe 5 years ago, all of the beekeepers thought that these tiny varroa mites you see here, Milben in German, that they are sucking on the hemolymph, so the blood of these insects. But that was wrong, because I had no explanation from the physiological point of view, because the hemolymph does not have energy enough. Yeah? And they have no problem with water, because they are in a highly humid beehive and they have heat enough. So where's the problem? But the thing is, they don't suck on the hemolymph. They suck on the fat body of the bees. And so our idea was, okay, when they like fat, they have as a nutrition, we can set up a honey pot in the beehive, but not filled with honey, but with fat. So, and the fat that resembles the body fat of the bees, that resembles of the fat they collect in nature. We did that, and yeah, it was working quite good. So I don't know, something happened over there, but I hope the stream is still working. So we developed a lure that traps this varroa mite, for example. And you can use this in buildings as well. So, for example, you can use the painting of a building to protect it from being found by specific animals, for example. No? Maybe you have recognized on the motorways here that sometimes there are blue reflectors. And these blue reflectors are thought to keep away the animals from running onto the roads. This is some kind of sense irritation. Okay, so here you see varroa mites in the beehive. Okay, so what is the next challenge? Next challenge here is mate competition. Okay, sometimes you have intraspecific or even interspecific competition to find a mate. So if you have a dominant male, for example, in a group, in a population, when you look at apes, for example, there's a strategy of some males to get into some boundary with this dominant male and to friend up with him. And so when that male is going somewhere else, he takes the wife of the alpha. Yeah, it's a strategy that has developed. I don't want to tell you that this strategy is something that can be used for climate protection, but you see that sometimes behavioral changes can solve problems and can enable you to transfer information to the next generation, for example. Okay, next challenge in nature is human activities. So yeah, so what are humans doing? Humans are exploiting the planet. They're using fossil energy. So that was stored over millions of years. And yeah, we're using this energy now to consume. and producing CO2. It's a problem. It's a problem for animals as well, but they develop methods because they have smaller generation cycles. They are faster to adopt, not the elephants, not the elephants or not other animals that become older than we, but other animals, they maybe don't have that big problem, and we can look at what are the strategies of nature to dump CO2, for example. And there are ways to do so. So even producing honey with honeybees is a way of CO2 dumping. When you think about, so how much carbon is in 1 kilogram of honey, yeah, you know, so, but we are not storing it. Of course, we are consuming it and then producing CO2 as well. But we're using the energy of producing these carbohydrates using a circular agriculture, compared to simply exploiting the woods or huge fields, or taking away the woods to have other plants that seem to be more useful. Okay, so here are some selected examples of biomimetic inventions from our lab. So we have bioinspired image processing algorithms. We have active surfaces like structural colors. So inspired from butterflies, for example. They have a blue color, for example, although there's no blue stain in there. It's just a physical trick. And they can, for example, collect infrared as well. So we have biogenic structures and biogenic building materials. We have bioinspired robots or biohybrid robots. We analyze the biocybernetics of movements, for example, to therapy of movement artifacts. So, for example, in golf or in billiard, you have the so-called yips. So that means when you're putting, a second or a fraction of a second when you hit the ball, you have a twitch and the ball goes anywhere. So a student of mine analyzed how this is working on the mental way, and then he developed a device that is distracting the mind of the golfer that way that the yips does not occur any longer. And by the way, alcohol is also working quite good. And manipulating insect navigation as insect protection or pest control. So when you look here, you see this tethered flight. So you stick a fly, for example, and you have a moving structure down there, and look at the head. This is the optical flow under the insect that steers the direction of where this animal is flying to. You know? It can be, and we're on the reverse engineering side, flight controlling these animals. Okay, so this is the example. You can start this video. So a butterfly wing is not only in a beautiful color, but it's also omniphobic. It can protect from fats, it can protect from water, and this is honey we dropped on this butterfly. And and this is the they have the microstructure fulfills, and that is quite often in nature, many functions. It's the physical effect of color, but also a nanostructure that is protecting the butterfly for so many problems. So, for example, there's this monarch butterfly, and they are that stable that they can fly up to 3,000 to 4,000, up to 6,000 kilometers to go to their mating grounds. And for example, a female honeybee, a collector bee, only lives 6 weeks during the summer, but had many other roles before, where it is socially rotating. So raising the kids and protecting the hive, and the most trained bee then starts collecting. And when they are after 6 weeks, their wings are some kind of rotten, and yeah, they will stop being able to fly, and they will end up somewhere else and recycled. We used soft lithography, so using silicon rubber, 2 component silicon rubbers, to make a copy, a negative copy from the scales of a butterfly wing, and then we used this for resin, 2 component resin, and what you see here is transparent resin that is bluish and has super hydrophobic properties just by copying. So this is, yeah, it is more or less copying, but the way using soft lithography is something that can be used for so many things. Yeah? Okay, and with this, I'm at the end of my talk, and I hope I gave you at least some inspiration how biomimetic research workflow or product innovation workflow is working. And I gave you some ideas of the main challenges that you can find in nature, because these main challenges are what nature is best trained in. So now I'm open for questions. Thank you. Yeah, so, okay, so I repeat this question. So the question was if the system dynamics in the Anthropocene that are occurring very rapidly, if evolution or animals can adopt fast enough to cope with that. And yeah, the thing is, when you look at the decrease in biodiversity, one could think that not. Yeah, so that is one problem what we are identifying. But the thing is, what happens? So there are also winners out of the change. But the problem with these winners is they indicate that there will be a change, quite a fast change in the spectrum of animals and plants. But in most cases, these invasive species, we don't like them because they produce problems, but only problems to us as a human. But for the Earth, this is a kind of solution. So when plants that are toxic or whatever go more and more to the north, it's not a problem for the plants, it's a solution for the planet to cope with that, but it's a problem for the humans. Yes, biology. So look at, for example, the Mexican Gulf, where we had this oil catastrophe. So I have peer-reviewed many papers. They took samples out there from the animals, and it took only 1 year that the animals were already some kind of ready with that problem. Yeah? And so nature was quite fast in handling that problem. And yeah, everyone was saying, oh, this is a huge problem. Crude oil in the water. Yes, it is a huge problem. Yeah, but biodiversity was able to develop mechanisms to get around that very fast. It's only, the problem is that, yeah, it's the conditions will change for us. So the area on Earth where no people want to live any longer will increase, and they will move to somewhere. Of course they will do. Yeah, I can give one example on that. So CO2. So what is the problem with CO2? CO2, we need CO2 for balancing our pH in the blood. So, and on the other hand, this is a problem. So for example, when you're going to high altitude, you detect a lack of oxygen, you're increasing your respiration rate, taking up more oxygen, but also expelling more CO2, and then you get a problem in pH regulation. But for the people living at the high altitudes, they have solved that quite fast. Yeah? And the other way around, we can also yeah. So you're right. The increase is quite fast. So we have definitely to do something against CO2 production. Yeah, we have to stop that, definitely. But for us all. When you look, for example, where did life come from? From the deep sea, for example. So what do you have there? Do you have sources of energy? You have these dark warblers, where you have temperatures of about 50 centigrade. You have huge concentrations of methane on other gaseous substances in there. Yeah, life came out of that. So why? And now they are mining the deep sea for these nodules because they are containing rare earth metals. Although we did not stop, or we did not already start to analyze all the organisms down there, maybe the solution to our future problems is down there in the deep sea, and humans are too stupid to find a new mine for these rare earths and to forget about the information. So what will you do when you go somewhere and you see a USB stick? A USB stick is €7. You can buy it, yeah? But what is the difference between one you find there? There may be some information on there. Who is not collecting that and maybe looking at what is on there? And yeah, with the deep sea, yeah, we're just destroying that. Yeah, so maybe we will not do the race, but nature will, definitely. Yeah. So for example, millions of years ago, oxygen was a problem. Oxygen is a very reactive substance, and animals were able to handle that. They were bigger, the insects were bigger because diffusion of oxygen was enhanced of the higher concentration. But for example, in the transplant medicine, when you transplant an organ and you switch on perfusion by connecting the vessels, the high oxygen content becomes a problem in the reperfusion. Nature has solved that. So for example, sea lions, when they dive for 40 minutes and they come back, they intoxicate themselves with carbon monoxide. And carbon monoxide intoxicates the hemoglobin and then decreases the resaturation with oxygen and decreasing the problem of that there's instantly a high concentration of oxygen. You see, there are so many strategies of how to handle changes in gas compositions, yeah, when evolution has at least some time. Yeah.
I have an additional question. So about energy and resources. So when we look the last millions of years, the nature operates resources and energy in a very efficient way, in a minimizing kind of way. How could we learn from this tragedy for ourselves, for handling resources and energy? Because in future, if we get rid of carbon-driven technology that have all in renewables, we still have the problem. We need some energy, renewable energy, but still have to reduce it to minimize the use of resources. How can we learn from that?
Yeah, so we can learn that from behavior, for example. So when the sun is a problem, go into the shadow. Okay, it's as simple as that. But when you're building something, you have to be, of course, flexible. So what are animals doing? When you look at the cold-blooded animals, when they need energy, they go into the sun. When they have enough energy, they go into the shadow or doing something different. So they have intuitive or maybe intelligent behavior. That means that the buildings of the future are, of course, smart, not only with reacting to So having solar panels or solar thermal panels to collect heat for the water and to collect electricity. But you have also intelligent mechanisms that you have a heliostat to follow, for example, like flowers do, or you can reduce the distances. So, for example, when you think of the honeybee, when you look at a factory, maybe you know this, the traveling salesman problem. Nature has solved that. So a fungus can solve the traveling salesman problem. The fungus wants to go from point A to B to C and wants to find the distance that is the shortest. Yeah? And that is so having regulation. So in organisms, regulation is one of the main processes. So regulation means negative feedback. It's not positive feedback because that is not regulation. In nature, you have positive feedback as well. So when you eat a toxic substance, you have a positive feedback cycle to get rid of that. But anything else is, it's of course regulation. And there are so many regulation strategies in nature that can serve to save energy, for example. And in the past or in evolution, so the energy that comes from the sun there was plenty energy. Otherwise, the plants wouldn't be able to dump so many CO2 into that, what we are now recovering. And we can dump things into biogenic structures. We can dump CO2, but of course, we have to find the strategy. So when you, for example, think of concrete, what do you put in there? You put sand in there. What is about the resource of sand? It is limited. It's definitely limited. So you have to think about finding a replacement for sand. And we already discovered plants that are able to build silicates, to build sand, or to even collect metals out of the environment, to collect gold or other heavy metals. Even gold is a heavy metal. And so if it comes to energy, always means sorting. To sort electrons, for example, to have a battery. It's you use energy for that, and then you can consume that up. And that is what nature is doing all the time, sorting, using solar energy to sort molecules, to store energy, to store energy in the electric way, or in carbohydrates or whatever. So we have to do so. So when the planet Earth dumped plant material, we also should do so. But in a way, we can regulate.
It was just some congratulations for your presentation and some questions for the slogans. That's already nothing more in the audience. Any other questions?
Thank you. So if you like to, on the FFG, we have this current project. It's called the acronym Biogendeski, but it's called Bioinspired and Generative Design with Artificial Intelligence. And we already have lots of researchers here at the University of Innsbruck, but we want to open that up to whole Austria. So we already have in this project, but this has to be, we want to do that in the future, even use that to build a platform to work together in this kind of bio-inspired way. So this, what I showed in this lecture here was how this bio-inspiration workflow is working and what to do and what you can do and what you cannot do. And maybe in future projects, we can do this in collaboration or in interdisciplinary consortium to find two solutions for so many things. I'm quite sure that in the architecture, so many bio-inspired inventions were already made. So when you look at the wood architecture of the spider connector and so on. These are things that are already bio-inspired. Okay, so thanks for the invitation and have a nice evening.